Right. Okay. So, yeah. So, home as a treasure of learning. So, in this topic, we'll be talking about what makes a home, why does learning work at home, the pitfalls of learning at home, that is the challenges and how to overcome them, and two of the many treasures. So, the two being one is the kitchen and the other is the upkeep. And I'll also be discussing a few more uh, aspects of learning at home. And finally, we'll conclude with a home with a higher purpose. So, here we'll be discussing on exploring the home environment to the maximum potential. So, what turns a house into a home? So, I just came up with a short list of all the P's that are there in a home. If anyone can contribute to this list, you can put it in the chat box. What turns a house into a home? Anything that comes to your mind. So we have various people in the yes, care. So if people are there at home, we naturally need caring people, not just people, and that's where pets also come in. The warmth and love at home, yes. Family, yes. So just having people is not enough. You need everything there to make it a family, to make the house a home. Respecting feelings of each other, faith, yes, faith in each other. Longer lasting relationships, blood based forms the home that is given to us. Okay, we can also create our own home where it is based on a deeper and longer lasting love. Yes, sharing between each other, conversation, hearing each other out. Okay, so you have actually jumped on a topic, one of the topics that we'll be discussing very soon. So we'll move ahead. Yes, caring. So here again, I found an interesting quote about how a house becomes a home. So in this house, we are family. Love each other, laugh a lot, sing out loud, do hugs, smile, share good things, forgive quickly, do I am sorry, show respect, play nice, play fair, do the right things, do your best, say thank you and please, honest with one another, keep your promises, be truthful, be positive, be grateful, and be humble. Respecting the personal space also, yes. So we'll move on. We'll be discussing these points a little bit more in detail later. So that's why we'll just move ahead. Okay. So there is a big myth that is going on in society today. That is, the learning happens only at school. Has everyone faced this? People telling you that your our children listen to you, but they don't listen to us at home, things like that. Or have you ever felt like that? So yes. So yeah, so this is only school is called an education institute, not homes. Yes, schools say seek AI hai. Yeah. So there's this big myth that is going on that learning happens only at the school. Um, but the truth is, learning happens in happiness. And since in school you have a lot of people who collaborate with the child, communicate with the child, you have peers, you have seniors, you have teachers, you have such a huge variety of people. That does not mean that you do not have a variety of people at home. But somewhere during our communication, which again we'll discuss a little later, uh, that feeling it seeps into the mind of the child that the learning happens only in school. It doesn't happen at home. But the fact is that children are essentially, younger children are essentially like sponges. They absorb pretty much everything that is around them. So learning is happening 24 by 7. And happy children learn quicker and deeper. This again we'll discuss in detail in one of the future Sundays. This has got a lot to do with neurochemistry. So, just in short, EDSO are four different chemicals that are majorly responsible for happiness. And C is cortisol, which is a chemical that is related to fear. So these chemicals work with each other and help create an environment where learning happens at an accelerated rate in the brain, or it doesn't happen at all. So, for example, the typical scenario of examinations, you cram everything in 5 minutes just before the examination, and in that fear, uh, you feel that everything is in. Then you go to the examination. Sometimes you blank out before the examination, sometimes you blank out after the examination because cortisol has this bleeding effect where after the fear has passed, it takes away all the short term knowledge with it. Some of my deep learnings have happened through my suffering and sadness too. How to reconcile this with happy learning? Okay, so suffering and sadness, the learning happens at the end of it. So, or the learning happens and that is the end of it. Because suffering is not something that you carry with yourself after the learning happens, because otherwise that means the learning has not happened yet. So that is one point. Now, through responsibility and ownership, also learning happens because now you are tapping into various resources of the brain that are very innate to the child and which need to be developed at a later stage anyways. So these are things that will develop by learning, and learning also develops it, so it works in both directions. Then personalized learning at a personalized pace. So at home, a child is able to learn at their own pace. Now, sometimes that this can be looked at as a downside also, because a few parents and teachers, I'm sure, will have this comment that if children will learn at their own pace, won't they take their own time? So we already discussed this in the last session, in the hand, heart, head session, that learning is something that excites more learning. So if learning itself is given that much of weightage, that much of importance, so a child will never stop learning and would want to keep learning more and more and would want to keep going deeper into that knowledge. Then one more advantage at home is everything is at hand. So there is no limitation of, say, during a science period, if suppose I'm more interested in something related to the history, as in if something has been discovered, why was it discovered and why at that time? Why not before? Why not after? So maybe the cultural environment at that time or the discoveries that happened before it led to that situation where this could be discovered finally. So basically the pieces were perfectly placed at that time. So now this part is usually left out in the class, but at home you have resources at hand. You can go to your library, home library. If you have encyclopedias there, you can search it out. You can check it out on the net. You can nowadays you can check it out on the net. You can ask people, you can brainstorm with people. So all this is available at home, but it's not necessarily available in all schools. So that is another advantage. Then one more advantage is there is no peer pressure and no external influence. So a lot of times it happens as one of the points that came up that the child has learned this in the school. We don't teach this at home. It usually is concerned with the kind of language that the children use. So, if the child has suddenly started using some questionable language or controversial words, it the onus is on the teachers or the school. So, um, it is looked on as if it is learned only from the school. At home, time constraint is also not there as there is no bell. Students can study at their own pace. Yes, exactly. So, an additional point to that part is if a child wants to learn a particular subject for a longer time, wants to delve deeper into that subject, the child has the freedom to do so. And learning something when the child is already engaged in it is very powerful because all the limitations are gone then. So a child may have the capacity to understand something better than what is assumed at that age for a child. So yes, that is an additional point. And coming back to the peer pressure point, um, so a lot of times what happens is just because something is viewed as cool by certain group of people, they influence another individual, and together they form another group which again influences certain individuals. So the mob mentality basically pulls people towards questionable actions, towards this kind of a behavior, which is the rebellious behavior of little consequence, like little positive consequence. Usually, rebellious behaviors can be looked at both positively and negatively. In a positive sense, if there is actually a lot of constraint, a lot of limitations, and if there is a rebellious behavior against that, yes, it can be positive. But if things are already quite liberal and there is a rebellious behavior, then it doesn't serve much consequence because there is no result out of it. So things like that children learn from peer influence, and this is not there. So you get this interesting time to study what the child is naturally, what is the innate nature of the child. So the child will develop his or her own authenticity, his or her own integrity, and if given the right environment, this will flourish and this will also grow stronger. So the child will not be very easily influenced by various factors around. Then nothing is out of portion. So as mentioned here, just because your textbook chapter ends there, if the child is very interested in studying that topic for more amount of time, the child is free to do that. And this happens at home, but it very rarely happens at school. Then natural learning through seeding. So this is another point which not many people understand. A lot of things, even if the child does not reflect today, are well seeded in the child's mind. So, for example, if today a 4-year-old is taught to share, so the action of sharing leads to two pieces of knowledge. One is the empathy, and the second is the mathematics behind it. So if the child is used to sharing things between brothers, between friends, and the child knows, okay, if I have got five chocolates in my hand and if I share it with everyone, how can I share it efficiently and things like that. So later on, the child will be quick in learning division. So this is one kind of seeding. Then again, coming back to authenticity and integrity. So today, if the child learns his or her own authentic and integral self, later on the child will have a very strong personality and will not be very easily influenced by people. So when something is ethical, it is ethical and there is no workaround for it. So that sense of ethics will also grow very strongly. So that is seeding. Then spontaneous revision. Now, since the child is anyway spending time at home, usually what happens in schools is since the learning happens in a lot of schools, the learning happens only through books. So the child remembers everything from the book, and the child also develops some kind of a dependency on the book. So the children don't feel very confident if they don't have the book around them. So at home, since the learning is happening through natural means, through things that are around them, the revision is also happening spontaneously. So if you have already learned how to make bread, how a piece of bread is baked, and before that where the wheat comes from, and before that how the climate affects the wheat, things like that. So every time the child sees a piece of bread, the child will remember all those pieces of knowledge. So the revision is also quite spontaneous. And then continuous assessment. So if the child knows so much about bread today, the child will probably not waste bread very easily. The child will probably not waste food very easily. So the attitude towards the food will change. And this is the assessment. So today the knowledge has been completely instilled, and the child is actually showing it in the thought process and in their own attitude. Now, the challenges of studying at home or staying at home. So these are the challenges that normally arise. One is the lack of focus or lack of diligence, because there are always people around. In classrooms, you have a completely focused scenario. Um, all the rooms are structured in such a way that everybody is facing in one direction, and that is towards the teacher. So you are basically forced to listen to the teacher or forced to look at the blackboard. So obviously that focus will be there physically in that classroom. Mentally, we don't know, but at least physically, they are facing in the same direction. Here, physically, they are definitely facing in all possible directions, and mentally, we don't know where the focus lies. But interestingly, if you check later on, if you ask them that okay, you were studying this, you were learning this, so can you tell me what is the answer for this, or can you tell me how this works? Somehow they will figure out the answer. So that focus is there even though it is not visible. Then the lack of a driving factor. So in schools you have different competitions, you have examinations, If all those things are not there, if there is a lot of uncertainty, there is no schedule, then there is no driving factor in learning at home. So you don't go into that mission mode where you have certain parts of the day where you are learning intensively and so on. And there is no accountability, since there are no examinations, since there is no testing, since nobody is asking you questions directly, since there is no review of how the day has been spent, so there is no accountability. Yes, we'll come to the self motivation part. So another part is mental health. So this is since the children are enclosed and the children have this requirement of physical activity, which is not getting fulfilled. So it will the stress levels will rise somewhere else. So that is on the mental level. And since the stress levels rise on the mental level, the mental health gets disturbed, and you have children who feel depressed, who are hyperactive, who sometimes get aggressive, things like that. Then you also have discipline issues, so-called discipline issues, where children don't listen to people. So this is again related to physical activity. If the physical needs are not fulfilled, they will want to run around. They'll want to be aggressive. They'll want to not listen to you, or they'll just ignore you. Things like that. Yes, we are learning from our daily shows, not learning from the books at home. Yes, we are coming to that. So, what do we do about these challenges? So, for lack of focus or diligence, if you set up a routine or a plan, and you also involve the children and yourselves in journaling is a very healthy habit for everyone. It's just not just for children; it's for adults too. So you can also have family meetings about the plans. So in the morning, if you have a family meeting and plan what you are going to do for the rest of the day, and at the end of the day, if you have a closing meeting where you discuss um, what, how efficient was the day. So you can do these kind of things. Then, for lack of a driving factor, you can rearrange an area of the house for concentration intensive activities. So, if you have like a classroom scenario, but more um, with the say of the child, so you involve the child in constructing that area, whether the child wants a certain shelf in one place, whether the child wants a certain table in one place, things like that. So the child will be more engaged, and the child will feel like the child will have an ownership for the place. Then keep a record of self progress. So you teach the child self evaluation. So instead of depending on certain arbitrary figures that judge how much you have learned inefficiently, you help the child figure out a way to self evaluate, a way to understand self progress. Then learn to calculate efficiency. So this is related to the previous factor. If you sit and figure out how to spend the day efficiently and whether the day was spent efficiently, so you maybe have a percentage chart for the schedule. So certain percentage of the schedule was done very well, and a certain percentage of the schedule was not done very well, so you know whether you have spent the day efficiently or not. So this is a very big opportunity for learning for the child, and which will also be a big contribution factor for success later on. That is dependent on the definition of the success. Then no accountability. So instead of no accountability, you can say self accountability. So here the uh, point of self motivation also comes in. So the child is going to learn from responsibility and ownership instead of certain external factors. Then mental health, again the journaling part. Then self counseling. So the child, through journaling, through discussions, will learn how to do self counseling, will learn how to be that conscientious, that can understand what is related to emotions directly, and where logic comes in, and where the child can reason things out. Won't help if they are learning from others by force. Yes, these things will definitely not work out, will definitely not be learned in an external environment where things are stuck to a certain schedule which is common for everyone, which is not natural to the child. But this will definitely be learned at home. Then reaching out to friends and family, learning from them, what are they doing, figuring out solutions from them, how are they dealing with the stress, helping each other out, counseling each other. And obviously, teachers, you can definitely reach out to teachers. Let the children talk to the teachers directly instead of you calling them and saying that the child misses you or something like that. You let the child talk to the teachers. Then the discipline part. Okay, so the discipline thing has a certain number of factors. One of them being the topic that the topics that we'll be discussing today, and the other one being tools how to work on those topics. So one example you can see on the bottom right corner. These are basically circular pieces of paper that are pinned concentrically, so that in the center you have different names, and then you have certain duties in the subsequent layers in the subsequent papers. So every time you rotate the chart, so that the duties rearrange, and then you can have circulating responsibilities. This is called a chore wheel. CHOREWHEEL. So a chore wheel is a good way for getting children to do the chores. Then you also have the kitchen board that you can see here. You can also have the children get involved in. Can you show the chart, please? Okay. The chart is very easily available, man. You can just search for. I just put it up in the chat box so that everyone can see it. It's called a shore wheel, and it is very easily available on net. I have actually picked out the simplest one so that you can understand the concept of it. But there are a lot of elaborate ones online also, where they have given spoons and utensils, and they have actually drawn a toilet and things like that. So the children understand. Although it is more fun, it is more artistic. So now coming back to the kitchen part, so this is an example of how you can make rules around the house. So you can have certain rules for certain rooms, you can have certain rules for certain activities, and you can help the child. You can sit with the child and make these rules with them, and you can also make certain boards and charts for these rules. So this is a very good opportunity. I'll also discuss um, what learning the children get out of this, because this is also very important. So yeah, so these are the parts. Then making individual and family schedules. This is also very important. If you do this, this is very helpful for the entire family, and the entire family is kept accountable for what they are doing and how they are doing. Then rule charts we have already discussed. Then no rewards, no punishments. This is also very important. So schedules, when you form, it doesn't mean that the children have to follow the schedule 100%. Let the child calculate the percentage of efficiency of the schedules at the end of each day. So in the morning, if you have a planning meeting, at the end of the day, if you have a discussion, where a certain part of the discussion is also that the about the efficiency of the day. So then that lets the child be self accountable, and you don't need rewards or punishments for that. So yeah, that pretty much solves the challenges at home, a few of the challenges at home. But if you think from this perspective, a lot of other challenges also get solved automatically. So now moving forward from the chores, we'll discuss the two topics that are a part of the CBSE circular. So the first one is the running of a kitchen is an immense learning resource. Um, so a lot of times what happens is the children don't realize how many people are working in the house and what are they doing and what is going on. So the homemaker, the person who is actually working at home, is basically invisible to the child because food just magically appears in front of the child. Things just get magically cleaned. Toys get magically set up in their own place. So the child doesn't understand or doesn't feel responsible for anything that is happening at home. So if this is an integral part of the child's day, it helps the child become more organized, it helps the child become more responsible. And other than that, when the child is involved in the kitchen, they also learn a lot of abilities or skills that nowadays are considered to be essential skills in terms of academics. So you also have things like cognitive development, affective development, and psychomotor development. So these are just another set of words for head, heart, and hand. So cognitive development is basically related to the brain, being able to differentiate, being able to think and analyze things like that. Then affective is related to the heart, so emotions, empathy, responsibility, gratitude, all this comes in affective. And then you have psychomotor, which is related to your physical part, so that is your hands, your legs, things like that. Then one thing which is very unique in kitchens is it shows you the unique ways energy, the unique ways certain things can help um, influence certain materials. So basically, if you say heat a potato, or if you boil peas, or if you freeze the peas, so what happens to it? So the effect of heat on peas. If you cut certain vegetables, how does it work? If aloe vera is one very thorny plant, so if you cut a leaf, you can see the gel inside it. So you see how different things work with each other. So all these real life experiments can be explored only in these scenarios. My kids have started voicing out their gratitude towards the helping hands around. Yes. So that is going to be an obvious result. If the children help around the house, they realize the amount of effort that goes into it, and they'll be not only respectful towards the people who help us out, they will also have gratitude towards them. Then, life skill. Besides cooking, they also learn interdependence, collaboration, and the joy in community work. So, whenever you are working in a family, especially in the kitchen, you have certain responsibilities that you delegate, you have certain responsibilities that are handed to you. So, you realize that everything has a place. So, if you do your work, if everybody else does their work, then the result is good. Suppose you are given the job of, say, just frying the onions, and somebody else is given the job of cutting them, and somebody else is given the job of adding the materials for the gravy at the right time. Now, everyone is, if they do the work properly, then whatever comes out will be really delicious, really worth savoring. And if anybody is not doing the work properly with full efficiency and responsibility, so that will show in the taste of the food. So this is just a very small example of something like this. Then you have STEM qualities, STEM abilities. So STEM is related to science, technology, English, and mathematics. So this is again a modern way of trying to uh, incorporate holistic education. So in that you have classification, organization. They learn different quantities. So if you say 1 teaspoon, 1 spoon, 1 tablespoon, things like that, you have certain weights, you have certain amount of water that you add, milk that you add, things like that. Then the thermal conductivity. So if you have certain vessels, the food will get hotter soon. If it gets too hot very soon, so maybe the bottom part gets burnt. So you need vessels that transfer heat uniformly. In terms of baking, baking is a very good learning exercise for children. They also said that now they need not go out to a restaurant for special food, as they have understood that they can make it on their own. Yes, so self-sufficiency. This is another very useful thing that you learn. So these are the different things that children can learn just through the kitchen. And this is not an exhaustive list. There are a lot more things that can be learned. Then you have chemical reactions. Certain things get hard when heated, certain things get soft when heated. Uh, Certain things, if you add water to them, they solidify. Certain things, if you add water to them, they dissolve. So things like that. Then coming to upkeep. So upkeep is basically the maintenance of the house, and in most households in India, usually you have helpers who are responsible for this. You have servants, you have working workers who come and do things for you. We have this thing here that you have any leakage problem, you call a plumber. But that is not necessary if you know how to do it yourself. So you can use this time to learn these things. Along with that, you also learn the management of space, time, and self. So if you are involved in cleaning, if you are involved in mopping, if you're involved in washing the toilets and bathrooms and everything, you learn also about hygiene. Um, they also learn safety in the kitchen and handling things with care. Yes, we usually have this tendency that if a child can get burnt by fire, then we prevent the child from going close to the fire. But that is not necessarily a constructive process. That is not necessarily a way to uh, ensure a child's safety, because today's lack of learning will lead to tomorrow's tragedy, will lead to tomorrow's crisis. So it's better if the children learn all these things today itself. Then, so all these things today, it teaches you something on a shorter note, but at the same time, it seeds these thoughts, it seeds these concepts, which let them learn things later on also. For example, here they will not directly learn responsibility, but tomorrow when they think about things from a different perspective because of all this, they will work differently. They will look at things differently. For example, today if they learn how to work in the house, if today they know how to sweep, mop, wash toilets, wash bathrooms, Tomorrow they will not look down upon helpers. Tomorrow they will not tomorrow they will not disrespect the workers on the road who are cleaning the roads. Tomorrow they will have a certain sense of gratitude and respect for these service providers. Then okay, on a shorter, in a shorter result, this will also lead to them using things in the classes and the laboratories carefully. They will be arranging the books in the library very carefully. Then you can also involve the children in gardening. They can also learn about medicinal and healing herbs like tulsi and turmeric and things like that. And yeah, so coming to these things, these alternative methods like gardening, you have kitchen gardens, you have medicine, Ayurvedic gardens. Um, you also have bioenzymes and soaps. So bioenzymes and soaps also can be made very easily. I actually have a bottle of bioenzyme with me right now. Yeah, this is it. So this is basically a jar filled with just water, jaggery, and orange peels. So if this is left to ferment for about 30 days, about a month, it makes a universal cleaner. So, okay, can't see. I'll just bring it up again. Okay, is this visible? So you can see the peels. You can see they have not settled down in the bottom yet. So it is meant to be kept for around 20 to 30 days, and within that period of time, the peels will settle down and then it is ready to use. Okay, I hope the presentation is visible. Okay, okay. So bioenzymes are very easy to make. You just need one portion of jaggery. You need three portions of whatever you are using. If you are using lemon peels, you can use lemon peels. If you are using vegetable peels, you can use vegetable peels. Fruit peels usually work best. You can also use flowers, things like that, and you let it ferment. Okay, so the ratio is 1 is to 3 is to 10. I'll just put it up in the chat box also. So 1 is jaggery, which is good. Then 3 is your peels or waste, and 10 parts of water. Okay, so yeah, okay. So if you have say 3 kgs of peels, you put 1 kg of jaggery and you put 10 liters of water, because 10 liters of water is essentially 10 kgs of water. So if you mix this up and you let it ferment for about a month or so, when the peels come down, when they settle down, and you start smelling something like acetic acid or something fermented fruits, then that means it is ready. Now, this is a universal cleaner. It can be used since it is an enzymatic cleaner. You can use it for anything. You can use it for clothes. You can use it for the floor. You can use it for utensils, for very um hard to remove stains. And if you add um, 1 month fermentation, universal cleaner, yes. Preferably airtight, yes. If it is airtight, it is better. So one thing that you have to be careful about is, since it is fermentation, it will be releasing a lot of carbon dioxide. So every morning, just open it a little and keep it open for a minute or two, and then close it again. And just make sure that all the peels that you are using, they are not diseased or they have not caught fungus. So the peels should be fresh. They shouldn't be rotten peels. Over ripe is fine, but not rotten. So if this is stored for a month, the bioenzyme actually is very easy to make, and you will find lots of YouTube recipes for it. So this is one thing. Then after it is done, if you want a good scent in it, if you want to use it for clothes or something, then you can maybe use a little bit of essential oils. Maybe you can use a little bit of citronella. So citronella is lemongrass. In Marathi, it is called gauti chai, gauti chaha. So you can use that at the end. You can use the oil of that, and you can also turn it into a soap if you use Rita. Rita is soap nut. That also I'll just put it here. Rita or soap nut. Okay. So if you use Rita or soap nut, then it also becomes, matlab you can develop foam with it, so that you can use it for as a soap, like a proper soap, like hand wash and things like that. Then they can also, coming back to this, they can also learn how to test for the potability of drinking water at home. So why is the tap water not safe to drink, or why is the filtered water safer to drink? They can check that. And now, since they'll be cleaning their own toilets and bathrooms, they'll also take care of toilet hygiene. This is actually mentioned in the CBSC uh, part. So you can go through it again. And there is one, the ending note of this part is very interesting. So Anita Karwal, the chairperson of CBSE, writes, the world needs a paradigm shift in the way we think and do things. And you can facilitate this if you choose. So if we actually explore all these possibilities, it will not just affect the child's immediate future, it will lead to a paradigm shift. A paradigm shift is a shift of perspective. So imagine an entire society of people who respect everyone, no matter what their social status, no matter what their economic status is, and no matter what job they are doing. Today, we see a major part of the population looks very differently at women. They look very differently at helpers. They look very differently at children. So that respect is only in certain directions. You children are expected to respect their elders, but what about respecting the children? So things like that. So in the future, if we work on things like this, the future will be a lot different from what we see around. Now, other than these, there are a few learning opportunities that just came to my mind, so I wanted to share it. One is making a map of the house. So this is a very, very, very useful activity. The children can learn measurement. You don't have to necessarily give them centimeters, you don't have to give them millimeters or meters or whatever. You just give them a piece of string and ask them to count how many strings is this wall, or how many strings is this room. So things like that. So they learn measurement, and they'll learn how to make their maps. Since the map has to match the room, they'll learn the geometry for it. They'll figure out how to make perpendicular lines. You don't have to tell them, because the objective will not be the technical skill of making perpendicular lines. The objective will be to make the room. So when you make the room, you try to figure out various innovative ways to make it in the soap that the sorry, in the shape that the room is actually. Then the diligence, because making a map of the house is not that easy. They'll be crawling behind sofas, they'll be crawling behind cabinets, and they'll be figuring out all possible corners of the house because they will try to get the exact map of the house. The effort that they put into it will obviously create a deeper sense of learning for these points. Then house rules, we had discussed this previously. They also engage the child in language, as in wording it correctly so that people don't figure out loopholes to work around the rules that they set, because this is something that most of us are expert at. We as Indians tend to figure out the different loopholes in the legal system and get out of it. And then we have court cases related to that. So if you are very careful with your words, you learn the correct language to use for certain situations. Then there is civics. So you have to have civic sense. You have to make your own rules, regulations, and you have to study your rights. So, for example, if you do a certain task that you're supposed to do for someone else, you get the rights for something that the other person owns. So, very simply put, if you help someone out, maybe that person will let you bat first in cricket, things like that. So this is how you learn interdependence, civics. Then you also have discipline, honesty, integrity. Since you have set your own rules, you have to follow them. And since you have set your own rules, you also know the reason behind them. You know where the rules have come from and why they are necessary. Then sustainable living. So we have already discussed bioenzymes. Um, Kitchen gardens is so if you can grow say tomatoes or bindi, that is okra, or lady's finger. You can grow your own brinjal. You can grow your own onions. If you grow your own onions, you can also have green onions that is fresh, which you can cut and keep cutting. You can grow your own mushrooms, you can grow various things. Then you have composting where you use vegetable waste. So, whatever is being cooked in the kitchen, if everything is collected and everything is composted, so that can be used again in the kitchen garden as fertilizer. Then Rita, as I mentioned, soap nut is a natural soap. The best part of using bioenzymes and Rita. Uh, okay, so first part is, since you are not using anything chemical, it doesn't harm your skin. Secondly, you see all these advertisements about 99% germ kill and things like that. This is actually not necessarily very good, because 99% germ kill means also organisms that could be helpful to you. So you have certain bacteria that are helpful, you have certain bacteria that are not helpful. You have certain bacteria that are very similar to disease causing bacteria, but they don't cause diseases. So if you ingest them, they will develop an immunity for the disease causing bacteria also. So these kind of opportunities are lost. But if you use organic things like Rita or bioenzyme, these bacteria are still there, and they help you develop a better immunity and help you face diseases which you would otherwise be very susceptible to. So that is one part. Secondly, the soap water, like after washing your hands, after washing your clothes, the water that is collected, you don't need to just dunk it in the basin or drain or whatever. You can collect it and use it for your plants. Since there is no chemical in it, it can be very easily used for your plants. You don't have to check it out. Then another point is minimalism. So while doing so many things, somewhere the children realize, the more things you have, the more time you lose out on maintaining them. So if you are losing out so much of time in maintaining things, and if you are losing out on what could have been, like suppose if you have 50 different toys, and if you are making, if you're using most of the time in arranging these 50 toys, you lose out on the time that you could have had in playing with one toy. Yes, decluttering. So they realize the importance of decluttering or minimalism. So less is more. So the lesser things you have, the more time, the more opportunity you have using it, the more time, the more opportunity you have with the people around you, and so on and so forth. Then leadership. Less is more has two more significances. One is if you have less things around you, you tend to be more creative. So, for example, if you have the perfect instruments for all the geometry that you want. So, for example, we'll come to the point of making the map of the house. If you have the protractor, if you have the compass, if you have the uh, ruler and everything, then you lose out on the opportunity of figuring out how you can use these things. The compass has been created by someone, but what about a child who is able to create his own instruments, um, which can behave like a compass? Maybe not exactly like a compass, but then gets the purpose solved. So basically, the child is learning to be creative. So that would be lost if you have too many things around you. Yes. If you have less things, then you tend to be more creative and more satisfied. Yeah. So, so this is again related to the EDSO thing that I was talking about. So every time you buy a new thing, it releases serotonin, which is supposed to be the chemical for pride, because you have brought something new. So it is kind of an achievement. You feel as if it is an achievement. And because of that, your achievements start becoming shallower and shallower, and there will come a point when where no matter how many new things you buy, it is not going to satisfy you. So if somewhere before this cycle, this vicious cycle begins, you curb this and you empower the child with ways how the child can make things on their own, then the child is more satisfied with what the child knows instead of with what the child has, because the child realizes that something like this can be made so easily and I can make it, I know how to make it, so they are generally more satisfied. Now, leadership, learning from the child. So, this is another point. A lot of things in the house can be led by the child. So, instead of doing everything for the child, like even in the case of the kitchen, if you are suppose cooking something, instead of giving the recipe or ordering the child around, okay, now cut this, now make that, now boil that, things like that. Why not let the child study the recipe? Why not let the child think on the ingredients, on why certain ingredients are there in that particular recipe, and then let the child delegate the labor. Let the child decide how we can together make this thing. So here the child also learns leadership. One more aspect of leadership, since here it is being done as a family, the child in the future will also look at leadership as a family thing. So, whoever the subordinates are, whoever the child is leading, uh, there is a certain sense of responsibility for them. There is a certain sense of interdependence and care for them and concern for them. So, the leadership later on will blossom into something that is more um, emotionally intensive. Yes, there will be a realization of responsibility. Okay. So another thing that is that is very precious is communication at home. So this a lot of you mentioned in the beginning, and we'll discuss this in more details. So a lot of communication that goes on at home is out of bias, out of conditioning. So to get an idea of what conditioning is for those who probably are new to this terminology. So conditioning, very simply put, is something that you have been led to think is true because of social structure. So that is social conditioning. Due to environment, so that is environmental conditioning, and so on. So, for example, if we have an experiment where you have say a yellow bucket, a pink bucket, a blue bucket, black, white, red, green, things like that, and you have them in this order that the first bucket is a white bucket, then you have a yellow bucket, then you have a pink bucket, then you have a red one, then a green one, then a blue one, then a dark blue one, and a black one. And you are asked to, the buckets are sealed, and you are asked to pick them up one by one. And you are supposed to pick them up from the from the yellow bucket. So when you pick up the yellow bucket, you notice that it is very light. You move on to the pink one. The pink one is slightly heavier. The red one is even more heavy, and the green one is heavier than the red one, and the blue one is very heavy. And now, when you pick up the black bucket, what do you think the weight will be? Do you think it will be more than the blue one or less than the blue one? Yeah. So the natural guess is that it will be more than the previous one because it is arranged in series. So because of all these buckets, the yellow, the pink, the red, the green, the blue, because they are arranged in first of all a series, and it has given the weight of the bucket is also related to the tone, the color of the bucket. Uh, you assume that the black bucket will be the heaviest. And if you want to uncondition someone, you make the black bucket the lightest and the white one the heaviest. So when you do this, you somewhere it clicks in your head that things are not as they seem. And the moment this clicks, you realize, okay, you are now out of that conditioning. So similarly, you have a lot of social conditionings also. Um, so I have listed a few of them. One very typical social conditioning is if you study a lot in terms of amount, like you study a lot and get very good marks, then you will get a good job and a settled life. That is the biggest social conditioning lie. There is no guarantee that this is going to happen. Then another social conditioning is the unidirectional respect, which I mentioned just a few moments ago, where the respect is meant to happen in only one way. So if you respect someone, the other person is not expected to respect you back. So basically, if a child respects an adult, the adult is not expected to respect the child. So this is another social conditioning. Then the definition of success. Um, we usually assume that success is more money, settled life, and a big car and a big house and things like that. But that is not necessarily the definition of success in everyone's mind. You ask the child what is the definition of success, and you will, from every child, you will get a different answer if they are not socially conditioned. if they have not been told by their parents that the reason why you go to school is so that you can study, so that you can get a job and be successful. Because here the series is like the buckets. So you first get your marks, so that is one bucket. Next, you get a good job, that is another bucket. And with the good job, you will get a lot of money, which is another bucket. And with that lot of money, you will be successful. And that successful being the next bucket, the last bucket would be peace of mind, happiness, things like that. But the fact is, all these are not related to each other directly. They have a lot of different interconnections. Then you also have, in this is especially in India. So it is a fiction that things can be perfect. This is only in India that a margin of error is okay, chalta hai. And this is specifically for the child, because a lot of times what happens is a child would be very engrossed in an artwork and will be doing the artwork for hours and hours together, but somewhere somebody asks, what are you drawing, and maybe wants to take the child out for a walk, or maybe wants to talk to the child for their own selfish motives or purpose. Selfish doesn't necessarily mean bad. Selfish just means that they want to talk to the child, so they want to try and talk to the child. So if the person is trying to talk to the child, engage him or her in conversation, but the child is just drawing and drawing and drawing. Somewhere you usually hear them say, Arey, you have already finished, what are you drawing more? Why are you going on with this? It's already done, it's already over. But the child doesn't look at it that way. For the child, the art piece has not reached perfection yet. So if you take that away from a child, this will translate into that, the typical chalta hai wala attitude that we have. That if someone has arranged for a meeting and the meeting is at such and such time, so 5 minute चलता है, बस 5 minute ही तो है. That then you have this tendency that suppose you have to cancel that meeting because of whatever, you don't call back, you just assume that the other person will take it for granted कि हाँ नहीं आया, things like that. So it's okay to not cancel meetings. So this attitude then later on translates into different attitudes in the company also. So if you are working in an organization and suppose you are manufacturing something, you are okay with defects. The margin of error is higher here. And in fact, if you notice, most of the so every company, every international company, that is MNC, multinational company, they have separate standards for different countries. So the Indian standards for a T-shirt will be different. The Indian standards for, sorry, the European standards for that T-shirt will be different. The American standards for the T-shirt will be different. The Chinese standards for the T-shirt will be different. So you will notice that the margin of error, the margin of defect is highest for India. So if you have color to color variation, they won't allow that product to go into the market in the UK or the US, but they'll let it go in malls and showrooms in India. So this is because of this. So today, if you pull the child out of the um, perfection wala zone, so they learn that it is okay not to be perfect. It is okay to not strive for perfection or accuracy. Then you have various biases. Um, so biases are um, things which we assume, like a platform based on which you build certain theories, certain assumptions. So, for example, typical bias would be women don't know how to drive, or the Chinese people don't know how to drive, things like that. So these stereotypes or biases, then women pilots, things like that, or men who stay at home dads, all these are biases. So the moment you hear about things like that, your natural reaction, not your natural reaction, but the general people's natural reaction would be like, stay at home dad, matlab wo karta kya hai? What does the father do? Just stays at home. How useless is that? So this is the typical mentality that most people have. And these are the biases that are there. Then another one is herd mentality. Just because everybody else believes in it, it must be true. Just because it is in the news, it must be true. And just because everybody else wants it, we need to have it. So that is herd mentality. If everyone says that a big car and a big house is success, so that means that is the definition of success. Then you have a lot of untouchable topics. You have religion, politics, sex, money. These are topics that are usually not talked about with children, but are must be talked with children, because these are things like, this is the reason why you have religious violence. This is the reason why you have politicians who manipulate you left, right, and center. And this is the reason why you have so many rapes happening, so much of gender discrimination happening. Uh, and this is also the reason why children don't understand the use of savings. They don't understand the meaning of investments. They don't. They treat money like it's like a secret transaction, as if it is not something that can be discussed openly. So these topics need to be spoken at home. These topics need to be discussed at home. Then you have environmental conditioning. So the hotter it gets, the more we try to be cooler. So if suppose the temperatures are rising, we'll first get a cooler. Then if they are rising even more, then we'll get an AC. Then if they are rising even more, we'll probably get an insulated house which has no windows, no doors, and just ACs and coolers. So you try to keep the temperature same. But then what happens along with this is, since you start liking the coolness of the AC or the cooler, you also try to reduce the temperature. Now, if you have been born and brought up, like, let's take the case of Amravati, which is where our school is. Amravati is a place which reaches something like 6 degrees in the winters, and it reaches something like 47 degrees in the summers. Uh, but because of that, the people here inherently should have gained the ability to be able to go across this range of temperatures. But instead of that, what is happening is, the people here cannot even bear the temperatures that are there normally. So if you are, say, because of ACs and coolers, if you have gained the tendency of turning it on 19, so even in a city like Amravati, where the temperature which you have been born with is 30-40 degrees Celsius, but you want the room to be 19 degrees Celsius. So this is a part of environmental conditioning. Then there is pollution. Then you have and allergies. So allergies is the natural environment conditioning. So there are times when you have hay fever and things like that. Then you have pollution, which we are bringing on ourselves, and availability of resources. So if you have less resources available around you, you are more innovative. We just discussed that in the creativity, the less is more part. And yeah, so these are different kinds of conditionings. Now, one uh, very typical thing that we do, another typical thing that we do is depicted in this picture. So this video, I don't know if you all have seen it. It's called, I'll just put it up in the chat box. It's called Wildebeest. So wildebeest is what you call as nilgai or blue bull. So wildebeest and crocodile. Okay, so if you just search for wildebeest crocodile animated video on YouTube, you will find this video. So one nilgai or one wildebeest is looking at this rock kind of thing or a log kind of thing in the water, and is telling the other wildebeest, "Okay, see, there is a log in, there is a crocodile in the water," and the other one say, "No, that is not a crocodile, it is a log." And they keep arguing like that, and the wildebeest, in its attempt to prove himself that this is a crocodile, it is not a log. The wildebeest pushes the crocodile, and the crocodile eats him up. And then the wildebeest behind him, the one who used to think that it was a log, now knows obviously that it is a crocodile, at the cost of the person who was trying to explain to him that this is a crocodile, not a log. And then this wildebeest tries to tell the other person that it is a crocodile, and the other person, the other wildebeest tells him, no, it is a log. So it is a circular event. So we have this tendency of disbelieving anything that is there in front of, right in front of our eyes, and at the same time, sometimes we have this tendency of trying to prove that we are right, and we lose a lot of time and resources in just trying to prove that we are right, whereas it doesn't necessarily have to have any consequence. So these are different conditionings. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning this is, if these are taken up very seriously at home, uh, seriously doesn't mean that you don't laugh about it. Seriously doesn't mean that you don't smile about it. But at the same time, they are discussed with sincerity. They are discussed with the weightage that it must have. We'll also discuss on um, what points to keep in mind while discussing these things. So yeah, so this is just a short list. You can also, if you think on these lines, you will come to know a lot more. Okay, so if you feel that there are any such topics which I may have left out here, and you feel that if it was discussed with you when you were younger, life would have been very different for you. You can share it in the chat box so that everybody else also can think on these topics. So yeah, so a few tools for communication. One is, you if you keep in mind on the things that tend to pull you in a certain direction, or tend to um, misalign you with what is necessary for the child at that time, or take you away from the facts, or take you away from um, things which would actually be productive for the child in the future. Uh, Maybe this will help you analyze those things. So you have this chart here, which is called the miscommunication model, and it has been made by Barbara Mahaffey, and it shows you how our head works around these conditionings, around these topics. So we have certain things that we want to do. There are things that we do actually do. There are things that we keep judging, we keep evaluating, and there are things that we keep planning about. Then there are certain things that make us what we are. So that is our intelligence, our body language, beliefs, personal characteristics, perceptions, so on and so forth. And the work history, sex, gender, needs, learning styles, these are different for everyone. Now, when you communicate with each other, then all these things come in the way. And they come in the way only if you are not aware of them. Now, Another statistics that is given is while thinking, around 500 to 600 words come in our head per minute. And while talking, you can talk around, you can speak out around 125 words per minute. So a lot of it is actually lost and a lot of it is actually suppressed. So we sort out several words and then share whatever we want to share. So if we are anyways curating our speech so much, why not uh, do it consciously, do it efficiently, and then share what needs to be shared, and try to keep honesty, open-mindedness, and neutrality in perspective. Then whatever beliefs we have, a lot of times children's questions can challenge those beliefs. A lot of times what the children say don't match with what we know. So instead of either suppressing them or correcting them, if you are not very sure of what is whatever you know, why not find out the facts and don't dodge these questions. And especially when it comes to like this can be this you can ask any therapist or psychologist also, uh, when dealing with delicate terms, dealing with delicate things like sex, gender, sexuality, and all these things, it is best if correct terms are used instead of having fancy terms for them or secret terms for them, because having fancy terms or secret terms for them means that it is an object of fantasy, means that there is some secret behind it. So why do you want to unnecessarily bring so much of weightage into it? It is what it is, just use the correct terms. Then expectations and intentions. So a lot of times we keep nudging children that what you did was right, what you did is wrong. So if we keep nudging them in one direction or the other, it is best if you, instead of telling them or correcting them or dominating them in this way, if you share with them what you expect and what you intend and let them figure out what to do. So instead of using these words right, wrong, good, bad, you use words that are actually uh, that are more accurate. Like for example, if there is a certain art piece the child has made, instead of telling the child that very good, wow, very nice, things like that, what is going on inside your mind is that you don't want to discourage the child because you think the child is very weak psychologically, and if you tell the child that you don't like it, the child is going to get destroyed. That is one. Or the other thing that is probably going through your mind is that you just like what the child has done, you like the efforts that the child has taken, but what you tell the child is this is good and this is nice. So instead of that, why not tell the child, I like the way you spend so much of time on it. Or if there is a certain something in the art piece, why not tell the child, I like the way you have drawn this, I like the way you have used these colors, or just I like these colors. So the child, uh, instead of putting things in brackets, now understands that everything has a place and everything works in a certain way. So even adults need appreciation, yes. So that is why I wanted to take this up, and this is a part of the last part that I wanted to take up, that is moving towards like a higher family or a home with a higher purpose, because these are things that are very less uh, practiced in society, or very few families practice them. But if you do practice these things, then I can guarantee you that it will have a very transformative effect in your family, and things will definitely change, and the child will look at the world differently, which will make the world better. So yeah, you can. I have already put in the name of the model, so you can go through it in detail. Now, other than those things, other than communication, there are also certain physical things or certain tangible things around the house that can be changed. Uh, there's a quote here by Melissa Michaels. Our homes should inspire us to go out into the world to do great things and then welcome us back for refreshment. So our homes shouldn't be just shelters. They shouldn't be just pieces of art to show off to your friends. They should be things that they should be environments that inspire you to go out and do something that changes the world, do something that actually shakes the world. So there are very small things that can be done, but they create a big impact. There is a picture here that I've put, which is of a cob house. Now, a cob house is a house made with mud and grass, and you would expect that a cob house probably has a life that is less than a concrete or a cement structure. But the truth is, it actually lasts very long. And since it is mostly mud and grass, it can be repaired at any time by anyone. And plus, uh, since it can be made by anyone, you can make it according to what you want. So here you can see somebody has used recycled glass pieces and made an entire wall with glass which lets in light, and plus mud structures are breathable, and since it is built in this way, like if you search, a lot of videos are there on building cob houses, so it will also help you understand that these buildings don't catch fire that easily. They are very resistant to weathering, and they also give a lot of they also give a natural feel to you, so which is from an evolutionary perspective also, which is very familiar. So you are more at home, so to speak. uh, so yeah, ventilation and natural light are very important. One addition to this is indoor plants. So there are something called CAM plants, or crassulacean acid metabolism plants. You must have heard of um, snake plants and aloe vera and things like that. So these are plants that have this curious tendency of keeping their breathing pores shut in the morning and opening them up only at night. Now, the result of this, since the rate of photosynthesis in plants is higher than the rate of respiration, so by the night time, the plant is filled with oxygen, and as soon as it opens its breathing pores, your room is filled with oxygen. So at night, when you're sleeping with the plant in the room, um, you will have a very good sleep and you will have a very fresh environment. So you have snake plants, you have erica palms, you have aloe vera, and several other plants. If you search for cam plants, you will find quite a lot of them. Okay, they also mix certain herbs that are natural pests. Yes, okay. So, okay. So I mentioned citronella before. So citronella also acts as a mosquito repellent. So if you use that in your bioenzyme to clean your floors, it will also act as a mosquito repellent to a certain extent. And these plants, citronella, can also be grown around your house. Uh, that is lemongrass. Lemongrass can be grown around your house so that very few mosquitoes come in. So it also acts as a pest or insect repellent. Okay. Now, another thing that you can do is limit the blue lights in your house. So, a lot of times you tend to go for brighter lights for the house so that the house is brighter and so on. But brighter light is actually more harmful to you. So nowadays you have most people who cannot see things in the dark, or whose eyes don't adjust that quickly to the dark. So this is a result of this. So the brighter lights you have in your house, and the longer you leave them on in your house, uh, you will have eye problems. The children, the future generations will have eye problems. So if you limit the blue light, at least the blue light, try keeping yellow lights, keep warm white lights, or things like that. So it will help the eyesight, and it will also help sleep. So it helps you sleep better. And if you sleep healthy, so obviously you wake up healthier. Then room colors also have a big role to play. So an architect in France, who I met recently in one of the education conferences, she had done this research where she checked the mortality rates, that is the death rates in the hospitals, compared to the wall colors. So she noticed that hospitals with the colors, with walls that are white in color, had more number of deaths, and the hospitals which had colorful walls had lesser number of deaths. So she took the research further, and it was revealed that if you have white walls, it tends to get you depressed. So our whole assumption against social conditioning. So our conditioning leads us to believe that white walls signify purity, clean, organized spaces, and stuff like that. But it's actually not that healthy. Then she also studied that people who wear red. So red usually has some kind of a dominating effect on most people. She studied the effect of yellow, blue. Blue, certain shades of blue can be very irritating to the eyes, and blue light definitely disturbs your sleep. That has also been scientifically researched. So room colors also have a lot of role to play. Mud colors usually are most friendly to the eyes. Brown is something that, from an evolutionary perspective, you are used to seeing and you find more familiar. Then, notice boards. Having notice boards in your house can be very useful, and it is very effective. So these notice boards can be used for posting artworks. It can be used for posting writing. Like if everybody has a tendency to write in the house, so you can post your work there. You can also post schedules and notices for each other. So notice boards must be there in the house. Then your walls, if they are plain, try to have some kind of artwork on them, or have space for children to do artwork on them. You can have collaborative art pieces with the entire family gets together and paints a wall. Then chalk walls also, if you have chalkboard paint, sorry, blackboard paint is very easily available in the market that can be used to make chalk walls. Then sustainable architecture, so cob buildings is one. Then you have rainwater harvesting, you have groundwater recharge, uh, you have mud buildings, you have bamboo structures. All these are sustainable buildings. So these are things that can be done around the house. One very powerful point for corp structures and other, the reason why sustainable architecture is sustainable is most of them are naturally insulating. So in a lot of places you will find that corp buildings don't even need fans and don't need coolers and ACs, because the house itself is cool. It is built in such a way that the hot air, if there is any hot air, then it is vented out, and In general, because of the good insulation that cob, bamboo, etc. provide, the houses don't get heated up anyways. So yeah, so that was pretty much what I wanted to share. Uh, the last quote by an anonymous person: "A house is made of walls and beams. A home is built with love and dreams." So if you have any questions, you can ask them in the chat box, or you can get in touch with me whenever you need. So thank you very much. As far as bioenzyme and soap making is concerned, there are a lot of YouTube links and a lot of companies conducting workshops. So you can also explore it through there. I am also putting in a site here. So carnival.com is a site where you can buy these kind of things. You can also they also conduct workshops on how to make them on and off. So you can use those resources. Thank you very much.